prices, you're bound to sleep soundly at the new look Des Kelly Interiors.
Off the ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
This is News Talk.
And you're very welcome along to Monday night's Off the Ball. Pretty quiet Monday today, has to say. Coming up, an in-depth guide on the do's and don'ts of WhatsApp messages. We'll discuss a mixed weekend for Irish provinces in the Pro 14 and the premature retirement of Dominic Ryan on Monday Night Rugby. Rory O'Connor and Eddie O'Sullivan are going to be joining us for that. The perils of umpiring a Serena Williams match, plus Andy West on the start of the Luis Enrique era with Spain. You can contact us tonight. 53106 for 30 cent is the text number. You can tweet us at Off the Ball. Be delighted to hear it from you even throughout the course of the night. Kieran Cunningham, Chief Sports Writer with the Irish Daily Star, joins us in studio. I'd imagine a quiet Monday for yourself, Kieran, today, settling back into the week with a nice degree of ease and putting the feet up on the office table.
Yeah, just a few pearls or a comment piece on the camogie. There was nothing else happening really. It was quiet all round.
Lesson learned today, if nothing else, never send a voice message.
Well, the other lesson learned, bizarrely, I've never had a smartphone. Never had a smartphone in my life. And one of the reasons was I'm online far too much anyway, and I thought I need some headspace. And I'm glad now I've never been on it. I've never had a WhatsApp, and I'm sure Stephen Ward has now deleted it from his phone, if he's any sense.
I'm sure his phone's been crushed and thrown out the window at this stage. For those who may have been asleep for the majority of today, the basic premise of this is, obviously we know that Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane basically outlined a series of arguments that happened in the Irish camp last summer, the summer just gone, that involved John Walters and Harry Arter. Harry Arter clearly has said that he doesn't want to be involved in the Irish setup for the time being. He's absent from the squad that has gathered for these games in the Nations League with Wales just gone, and on tomorrow night actually with Poland. He was staying quiet on his reasons for staying out of the camp, and this morning audio began circulating different WhatsApp groups that weren't Stephen Ward's of a message purportedly from the Burnley fullback that was outlining in great detail and with several uses of industrial language what had gone on in the Ireland camp that resulted in these rows between John Walters and Roy Keane and John Walters and Harry Arter, and sometimes a combination of the three as well. This afternoon there were a lot of tense conversations in this office about how close we could sail towards mentioning this, because ultimately the name wasn't out there. We'd no guarantee that this actually was Stephen Ward. We'd no guarantee that this actually was the correct version of events. Thankfully, Martin O'Neill did a lot of the legwork for us this evening.
First of all, I don't think Stephen was there. Stephen wasn't actually there, so I think he's just picking up on things, something that we talked about at the beginning of the week. Probably not anything more to really report. I think that differences of what was said, I think I mentioned that to you before. Definitely, as I said too, confrontation obviously with John, and confrontation with Harry. John's fine, absolutely fine. Harry perhaps not so fine.
Congratulations to the Irish journalists on the ground in Wroclaw who have now become minor celebrities in the area, because they've been asked to appear on camera and appear behind microphones to give a sense of what's gone on here.
And how would you explain? Imagine being an Irish journalist over there and being asked to explain Roy Keane. How could you explain Roy Keane? Where do you start?
Like, you're looking at like a Tolkien depth book as regards trying to go into the backstory of this. Just goes back donkey's years in trying to explain the enigma wrapped in a vest, wrapped in a shaved head that is Roy Keane. Yeah.
I know, but I think the scales have fallen from a lot of people's eyes in that his brilliance as a footballer kind of let us forgive a lot of the extreme aspects of his personality.
That happens with anybody though. Yeah. That happens, like the list of musicians whose shady pasts are, well, a lot of it has been brought into account, who are forgiven because, oh Christ, they wrote that album, or they sang that song. it's the same with sports people. We kind of forgive a lot of their, and Serena Williams is a case in point this weekend, I guess, as well. We forgive a lot of their ills because of what they offer in terms of their day job.
Yeah.
And Roy Keane was no different. Now, sadly, what Keane offers in terms of his day job is becoming less tangible.
Yeah, it's very, very vague. It's very, very vague. And like, even if you go by his last book, you know, he effectively said he was sulking for the last couple of months, or last while at Ipswich, and that, you know, he wasn't going into training for days on end, and he would turn up on match day and stuff. And you go, this is the manager, and he's saying that himself. If you were a prospective club owner or chairman looking to employ somebody, and you read that, you think, why would you give him a gig? And, you know, you go back to how he left Manchester United, that Alex Ferguson, the greatest manager of all, ultimately found him unmanageable. You know, the way he shot his mouth off at that MUTV thing, he can't help, he doesn't seem to be able to govern his tongue. Like what he says.
Even the fact that he's had 2 autobiographies out. Is he 50 yet? He's not.
Yeah, well, he's full of contradictions. He always has been. Like, this is a guy who has railed against celebrity culture for years, but who actually met the producers of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and considered going into the jungle to eat crocodile testicles. So,
amongst other things,
amongst other things. There were other things he could have eaten, witchetty grubs, etc.
Yeah, it's a bizarre situation. Dan McDonnell, the Irish Independent, is on the ground over in Poland. Dan, you're at this press conference. I'd imagine you're a minor celebrity now in that area of Poland, having been asked to explain all that's going on with the Keane and the Harry Arger and Jonathan Walters, and now Stephen Ward's situation.
Oh, listen, I just got the hell out of there. I didn't want to be explaining that to anybody, Richie. Like, I did have a look around towards the end because, I mean, and Kieran would obviously know this, it sort of split. There was a daily section afterwards as well, and there will be more coming out sort of, I suppose, overnight and tomorrow morning in the various papers. But it was in that section, because naturally, I suppose, in that section, the questions don't need to be as polished maybe as such, so there's a bit more detail being thrashed out. And, you know, I looked around and the Polish, they didn't have a clue what was going on. They were just sort of looking completely perplexed and puzzled by the whole thing. So, yeah, I mean, it just goes to show, is there ever really anything as a meaningless international friendly? You know, with the Irish team, there can always be a story that pops up when you maybe least expect it. And certainly, you know, I think most people, I don't know, a lot of people in Ireland of a certain age have got that WhatsApp audio by lunchtime today, and I guess it was no different around the Irish camp, the Irish team hotel, and we knew that we were on to a day that was a bit. It wasn't going to be a pre-match press conference about someone's hamstring, like that.
We heard a little bit of Martin O'Neill there. We'll play more of it in depth later on in the show. But that clip in particular, and it struck me while watching it as well, is that he was struggling for the right words to say around this situation. And again, he was just kind of uttering half sentences of stuff that we'd already heard in a way that tried to bat this away and put it to bed rather quickly. But the idea that we have, and I know Stephen Ward is probably going through the ringer this evening and today, we have the idea that we have a member of the Ireland team who's outlining the issues that some members would have with Roy Keane, at least offering their version of events to their mates. It doesn't strike a great note of harmony within the Irish camp. What kind of tone did O'Neill have with ye afterwards, without wanting to give away the content of what you're going to be printing tomorrow?
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, I have to say that, you know, I felt early on when it was discussed and it was raised, it was a bit awkward. But actually, as it went on, he sort of relaxed into it a bit more. And I'm not sure if I'd say, go as far to say, handle it quite well. But I don't think he sort of poured fuel onto the sort of flames either in terms of his general demeanour. I mean, we were obviously batting about all day, and we had got word as the press conference approached that they were going to address it, because naturally that sort of, I don't know, with concern, but, you know, it lingered. They could come out and deny it, and then you get into a sort of a very bizarre limbo with this clip that everyone had listened to. But they sort of come out and addressed it head on, and you know, they didn't deny, I suppose, that it came from someone in their camp, while also stressing that Roy Keane has a different version of events. But I suppose as much as is possible, he's got out there and he's had his say. But I think this goes back to last week, really, where at this stage I think Martin O'Neill has aligned himself very much with Roy Keane. So it's very hard for him to distance himself from him at any stage. They are very much a duo. They're 5 years down the road. They're almost 5 years down the road. He publicly supported Roy Keane last week with regard to this incident with Arthur. He said at that stage, that I've heard both sides of the story. So I'm guessing that the content of the WhatsApp audio, you would think, wouldn't have been that much of a surprise. In fact, a lot of it had been alluded to in reports. It's just to hear it laid out in very stark terms, maybe brought home to people the extent of what happened in the sub, and also, I guess, the attitude that the players have to it, in the sense that, well, I don't know, you're reading between the lines that this is something that they've sort of seen before.
Yeah, it is. We do get that sense from listening to Ward speak about it in that WhatsApp, Kieran, that, you know, you kind of get the sense that this is just Roy being Roy. But I don't know if Roy being Roy is 100% okay. Yeah,
because I wonder, and I'd be curious in Dan's take on this as well. Is there a generational gap there? Because I know it becomes a bit tedious when you hear Brian Clough references so often around this camp, but you know, we know how Brian Clough operated, and he would have been no stranger to physically hitting players and the language he used. And I wonder, do Roy and Martin think that kind of stuff is acceptable, and that the modern generation of players don't?
But they worked. This is the thing I can never understand about the Clough references. They worked under two different Brian Cloughs. Like the one that Martin O'Neill worked under, as Martin O'Neill will readily tell you, won 2 European Cups. Yeah. The one that Roy Keane played under was a barely functioning alcoholic. And I think that's pretty widely known, and it's not exactly the greatest example that any manager could set to a young burgeoning pro like Keane would have been at the time.
No, but he would always have always exalted Clough. Like I think part of it might have been due to the falling out with Ferguson, but he always, when he was asked is the best manager he worked under, he would have always put Clough ahead of Ferguson. So
yeah, it's the one thing is, Dan, you see, we've got 2 matches in this international break, and obviously we need a bit of a pick me up from the Wales disaster the other night. We're now barely thinking about football heading into the second match of the week. It's a bizarre situation.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe it suits them because there's no players. You know, they're really light at the moment, and they're on a bit of hiding to nothing with this game tomorrow. I think, I mean, you know, in the interest of fairness, I mean, they are seriously weakened with Coleman gone as well. Yes, you know, let's be realistic. You know, if Ireland have another drubbing tomorrow, there's not going to be a huge amount of sympathy because it just gets tied in with the whole, I suppose, the theme of what's gone on over the last week. And yeah, it is interesting to what you're saying, to hear your thoughts on their views. And I think Roy Keane, doesn't he sort of, you know, tell the anecdote about getting punched by Brian Clough, and he sort of tells it in a sort of fond terms. And you do get the sense that Roy Keane would quite advocate any strategy whereby punching players was an acceptable way of coping with it. And yeah, I mean, I think, again, we're going back to O'Neill. Felt like if he used the words in Cardiff on Thursday that this had been put to bed, you know, this Arthur row had been put to bed. So this coming up now, again, it just couldn't have gone any worse, really, you know, because they were trying to move beyond that. And I think really O'Neill had adopted the line that, well, Walters was almost man enough, you know, to get beyond this and to get over it. And he's here, and Harry Arthur is not. And I felt at that stage that Arthur's international future with O'Neill and Keane was over, but maybe now, I don't know, is there more sympathy towards Arthur because of the version of events that is now being circulated and that everyone has heard, if you get me, you know? So that's an angle to this. But I mean, this is like it has thrown things into disarray. I know sometimes we get accused of, like, you know, blowing things out of proportion, but this was going around this morning. Certainly, you know, my understanding of it was that you know, the management were aware of this from an early stage and you know, contacting the relevant people. So this is something that has ruined their trip effectively to this point, and they had a few hours to get it together, and to be honest, you know, in the circumstances, handled it reasonably well in terms of trying to push as much of a brave face on it as you can. But the reality of it is such that it's been, people now know what the culture is within that group, within the camp, that people have become accustomed to over a period of time, and they now have to decide. You know, after every bad result now, I mean, let's park tomorrow, but in October, say, this will be referenced. This will be, well, you know what the culture is like. You know what the mood is like. You know, any player carrying a knock or something, there'll be sort of an innuendo or a joke or a quip around it, and that is the problem that they're in. This couldn't have gone any worse in terms of a double header that was supposed to be about fresh vibes and forgetting the past and moving forward. It's the more recent past than the 5-1 to Denmark that's killing us now.
Yeah, because I think that's bang on, Dan, because I think there was a concerted effort to bring in, a former glasnost or perestroika over the last few weeks with, the round of media interviews that Martin O'Neill was being a bit more open. And that I think there was an attempt to show, to portray a fresh start, and that we're, drawing a line in the sand over what happened the last campaign. We're going to kick on. Then the Declan Rice thing happened, the Harry Arter stuff happened, and then the hammering by Wales, and now this stuff blowing up as well. And it's put huge pressure on them. And when you look how close the Euro 2020 draw is, and it's in the Convention Centre in Dublin, and the pressure to get a few results now in October is massive.
Yeah, it starts with tomorrow night.
It's huge.
Dan, we'll let you go and enjoy your local celebrity for the night that's in it. Dan McDonald of the Irish Independent. More from Dan, and imagine, as the week goes on. Just should mention as well that all this week we've teamed up with Virgin Media Sport, the new home of European football in Ireland. Their coverage kicks off on the 18th of September. To celebrate, we're giving you the chance to win a trip to see Manchester United versus Juventus at Old Trafford every night this weekend, or this week even. We're giving you a €50 one-for-all voucher, and we'll also go into the draw to win that trip for two to Old Trafford on Tuesday the 23rd of October. And as an extra added bonus, we'll throw in £400 spending money as well. To be with a chance of winning, just identify our Champions League themed mystery voice who describes his perfect Friday night in.
We'd have our dinner, we'd get into our beds, watch a bit of television.
Yeah, he's an adventurous sort.
We'd have our dinner, we'd get into our beds, watch a bit of television.
If you think you know who that is, text your name and your answer to 53106 for 30 cents, and we'll announce a winner later in the show. And bear in mind, you must be able to travel from Dublin on the morning of Tuesday the 23rd of October and return on Wednesday the 24th as well. It's all with thanks to Virgin Media Sport, exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers. Now with more than 400 Champions League, Europa League and Nations League games live this season, you can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever you wish. We also, this weekend, Kieran, on a quiet weekend, as we mentioned, had the stoking of one of the most keenly felt rivalries in Irish sport, which is that between the camogie teams of Kilkenny and Cork. And back-to-back, 2 in a row now for Cork, but again in, I suppose, controversial circumstances. We've had a lot of giving out about umpires and referees, and the camogie final was no different yesterday. Yeah, like the last two frees were particularly controversial, which enabled Cork to get the 1 point win in the end, and Kilkenny management were very unhappy about it, made it clear they were unhappy. But I don't know if you saw much of the game, but it was a tough watch. No, it was, the referee I thought was exceptionally fussy. Finicky, like. Yeah, finicky. Like there was, it was riddled with frees. There didn't seem to be much contact allowed. There were no goals. Most of the scores came from frees, and that was pretty similar to last year's final as well. So it's one of the only days when camogie gets a decent audience. There were over 20,000 people there, and also in terms of the TV audience, like this. So it's, Cork don't care. All they have to do is win the game. Like they're not worried about the spectacle, but for the wider good of the sport, I think you needed more. But I think I watch a bit of women's Gaelic football as well, and I think there's an issue with refereeing there as well, that they just don't allow enough contact and it's too fussy. Yeah. And I don't know why that difference is there between the men's games and the women's games. We'll get a sense of the reaction to the game after the final whistle. Maura Trasny-Kelly spoke to both managers to get their thoughts on the controversial end to the game.
Let's cut directly to the chase. That free at the 60th minute, it had you incensed. It had, to be quite honest, because in fairness, I just thought that Orla had the ball in her hand and she was going to ground. I didn't think she was fouled, to be quite honest. There's not an awful lot more I can say about it. I thought there was some very hard calls against us, but that's not, again, taken from Cork, They've got their win, and I hold my hand up and congratulate them, but I don't think Eamon had his best day either.
I didn't see it, to be honest, and that's not avoiding the question. I was trying to bring on a sub at that stage, so I didn't see it. But look, the way refereeing has gone in camogie, it's next to impossible now to referee it. I think that the teams have kind of outgrown the rules at this stage, and I think that certainly they have to come more in line with the hurling rules, really, to give a referee a fair crack at the whip.
For example, is there anything, would you pick up? Is it the physicality, perhaps? Is it the speed? What is it?
I think your contact has to change. I've been saying it for the last number of years that you can't referee a game where you have 15 players from 30 players on the pitch, and with the fitness level of these girls now, and they're all conditioned right, that no contact to me. So that's something that has to be looked at.
Surely the Camogie Association officials knew going into yesterday's game that they had two sides who didn't particularly like one another, even in the pre-match interviews, which are usually, when you talk Gaelic football and hurling, it's like, God, greatest respect to the opposite side. I was listening to the interviews with Sherry Farrell and co yesterday beforehand, which were conducted by Magherafelt as well, and they were barely hiding the fact that they didn't really like one another. You would think that the idea would be to let this game flow as best it can, because it was always going to be bogged down a little bit in a bit of tetchiness. Yeah, because you'd wonder, is there some kind of archaic attitude there that they see it as unladylike, the officials to... You'd hope not. To use an outdated phrase, but to allow people to be hopping off each other. But that's what people want. Like that's what both sides clearly want. That's the that's the nature of Gaelic games, that people relish the physical contact and people tearing into each other. So it's funny. It's one thing that unifies GA supporters. They argue about everything, but they all like to see people getting stuck in. Yeah. I think it's something that appeals to the Irish nature. Which is something we didn't necessarily see when we saw football from the Derry Championship just the other night. For those who haven't seen this as well, again, it's been a weekend of social media, I guess, between the WhatsApp voice messages and the footage that emerged from Slaughtneil versus Magherafelt, with video of the Slaughtneil players basically holding on to possession of the ball. You'd watch the video footage of it and you'd think that, they're 3 points up and playing out time and waiting for the final whistle. This is just before half time, and there isn't much in it at this stage. It ends up being a 10-5 victory for Slaughtneil. No, and you don't blame. I don't blame Slaughtneil. The team you blame there is Magherafelt. They're the team. Is what you're screaming. They're the team that are behind. They're the team that are massive underdogs that have to try and do something different to try and win the game, or try and be bold and assertive to try and win the game. But I think there is this malaise in Gaelic football that there's too many coaches that seem to want to do is keep the score down. They don't actually go out to try and win games. Like, how can you win game playing like that? How can you do it? Professor Niall Moyna was on with us on OTB AM this morning. He's talking about that video, and he had some pretty strong words about the state of Gaelic football as it finds itself at the moment.
Yeah, it's actually sad to see where Gaelic football currently is. It's an extremely poor spectacle. I've been to 2 games this summer. I mean, I would normally go 15, 20. Sometimes I go to 2 games a day. You couldn't pay me to go to watch a Gaelic football game now. It's absolutely appalling. And I think we have a responsibility to do something for our game. I gave a talk a few years ago at the AFL conference in Melbourne, and I spoke to some of the officials afterwards, and they had the same problem for a number of years. But they decided to address it, and they continually changed the rules. And when they changed the rules, the teams would catch up with that again, and they would continue changing the rules because they wanted to have it a spectacle. And their numbers now have increased dramatically. You just have to look at the attendance of the 2 All-Ireland semi-finals. For the first time in history, there was more attending than hurling, and rightly so. It's a game for the ages. If I was a young kid growing up in Ireland today, I wouldn't be playing football. Hurling would be my game of choice. Yeah, and we should remind ourselves that Niall has had previous involvement with GAA sides, with Monaghan and with Dublin in particular. So he's kind of got skin in the game to see this thing prosper and do well. We talk about Gaelic football dying over and over again. What strikes me, particularly watching that clip, is that a lot of teams, in terms of possession, begin to parrot one another. And when you get parroting and copying, the more and more copies you do, the less genuine and the less high quality it actually turns out to be. So you just get a worse version of what you were trying to copy before. So we're now into this cycle that we've got what Jim McGuinness did with Donegal, but just a completely awful version of it that doesn't seem to have any merit whatsoever. But again, we don't want to blow a Derry Championship game out of perspective and have that be the for everything else. But it's not like we haven't seen stuff like, maybe possibly not that extreme. That's extreme. But that is extreme. But we have seen stuff like this before, and I think this summer we did get the impression that we're coming to a tipping point. Like, I can't remember any championship where I was at so many games where it was so quiet, and you could hear the players calling to each other.
and the managers and the backroom team calling out onto the field, because people were clearly so bored, because it was just this over and backwards fist passing, soloing, standing on the spot, passing the ball backwards, and actually no ambition. And I think part of it is there's a severe shortage of real good attack-minded coaches. I think there's a lot of coaches now that have figured out a way of setting up defensively. But like, go back to Donegal, where when Donegal were the best, they were a really good fast counter-attacking team. Like, they were a million miles from just having men behind the ball. If you look at the tallies they put up with, also they had a lot of really good players. So now you have this thing. I was always really against rule changes, but you look at rugby, the rules change regularly. Aussie rules change the rules, as now pointed out. Soccer changes its rules, and there has been changes to Gaelic football rules over the years. Even the mark, I thought the mark was a bad idea, which worked out really well. And so you can make a point. No, there is a case then, should we bring in an attacking mark? Should have some people talk about you have to 4 forwards in your own in the attacking half all the time. Like, there are little tweaks that you would think could make a difference, but I think you have to trial any new rule changes. You can't just throw them in for the league or something. Like, you might have to bring them into the January competitions, or say the Sigerson Cup or whatever, but just try them out first and then bring them in. But I think it would be unfair just to throw them in
willy-nilly. Willy-nilly. We'll have much more on that. Loads more still to come tonight as well. Monday Night Rugby with Eddie O'Sullivan and with Rory O'Connor as well. We'll be talking to Jacob Steinberg about Serena's battle with Carlos Ramos at the Australian Open. The US Open and Flushing Meadow just gone, and loads more on the football show. We happen here with thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. We'll get to some of your texts about Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane and that WhatsApp message as well after this. Kieran's sticking around for the next few minutes, and you should too.
Off the Ball on News Talk.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.
President Clinton was in Ireland last Friday, and shortly before he departed, I sat down with him for an exclusive and in-depth interview. During our conversation, we discussed everything from the growing divide in American politics to the Irish presidential election.
Well, given the role of the president